Have you ever heard a house speak when no one else is awake? This is the hook that has followed me since the first night. I arrived at that old house by the lake. The idea is simple and terrifying at the same time, because a house should be silence and shelter, but in that house the silence had shape and voice. I came to that small town out of necessity and curiosity. I wanted to start over, leave the big city behind, and find a peace that my work and routine had stolen. I found the house by accident, an old listing, a nephew who needed to sell, and the moment I saw the place, I felt something familiar, as if I had walked through it in a dream. The house was made of wood with a wide door and windows that looked like closed eyes. It felt like a box of memories, waiting for someone to open. I moved in with few belongings and a suitcase full of expectations. At first, everything was normal: a clean night, the sound of crickets, and water on the lake. The first rainfall of that autumn made me heavy with sleep and peace. It was the kind of rain that promises rest. The first rule I learned in that house came quickly and without warning: never ignore what sounds strangely ordinary. The rain came in a tone slightly lower than usual, and at first it sounded like nothing more than wind tapping the glass. But then the sound sharpened, becoming a single note, like a continuous whisper, rising from inside the walls. That night I was lying down and felt as if the house were breathing, in sync with the roof, as if every drop on the wood were a letter forming a word I could not yet understand. I stood up slowly and walked through the hallway. The wood creaked under my feet, and every step felt like a response to that sound. I realized that what seemed natural was intentional, and that something there was trying to get my attention. With patience and persistence, rehook and transition, because holding attention at the beginning is never enough, and the house knew that. It repeated the call as if testing my courage. I wanted to believe it was only my tired imagination, that the cold and loneliness were shaping human sounds, but everything changed when I noticed the sound shifting as I moved. When I stopped, the sound softened. When I advanced, it came from another room. This was not an echo, it was a strategy, an invitation disguised as comfort. The second rule I share is always mark your territory of reason. When something calls you from the dark, never go by instinct alone. Investigate and anchor yourself. I took my phone, set it to record, and held a pen in my hand, an old habit from my days as a journalist, and from someone who never trusts memory alone. In developing the second key, the truth became clear. The house did not want to be discovered. It wanted company. It wanted someone to listen and repeat a story trapped in its wooden ribs. Through many nights, I learned to observe patterns. The whisper always came in the same rhythm before midnight and after 2 a.m. It helped to watch the clock and write down what happened. Slowly, the sound that once was vague became a map, and the map pointed me toward a hallway I had never noticed, and a small door with an old mirror inside. In the framing of these discoveries, a deeper meaning appeared. The house was not just a place, it was an archive of losses and memories running on repeat. And when you understand this, you realize that investigating is not about proving the supernatural, but protecting your sanity while dealing with something that feels alive. A quick summary of what has happened so far. The first lesson: never ignore sounds that seem ordinary. The second lesson: carry tools that keep you connected to reality rather than fear. And the third lesson: always watch for patterns, because fear loses its strength when it becomes information. And now, the call to action. If you are listening to this and feel a dangerous curiosity, tell me in the comments if you have ever heard a sound you could not explain, or entered a place that felt like it responded to you. And if you want me to continue in the next block, I will tell you about the night when I followed the sound to the mirror, the moment when the house stopped whispering and began to speak as if it remembered my name. If you stayed until now, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share with someone who likes sleep stories that end badly or make you think. And in the next part 1, we'll tell you what I saw behind the mirror and why some doors should never be opened alone. The night I decided to follow The sound was the night the house stopped, pretending, and revealed what it truly wanted. The rain had returned heavier, colder, almost metallic, as if every drop carried a memory. The whisper began earlier than usual, slipping through the floorboards before the sky even darkened, and this time it had rhythm, a slow and steady pull, guiding me toward the old mirror at the end of the hidden hallway. The first rule of that night was keep your breathing steady, because panic feeds whatever listens. I walked barefoot across the wooden floor. The cold felt different, not natural. It pressed against my skin with intention, as if something beneath the house waited for my steps. I kept the phone recording in my hand, its screen letting out a faint light. The whisper was no longer a single note. It grew in layers, like several voices trying to fit into the same tone, a chorus of breaths weaving into one thin thread that pulled me forward. The hallway felt longer than before, like the house stretched itself whenever I moved closer. I reached the door, and the whisper stopped. The silence hit me like water. Everything froze: the air, the shadows, the floor, and for a moment I thought the house was holding its breath. I pushed the door slowly and entered the small room, the one with the old mirror. The dust on the floor moved, as if something had just been there, and the cold concentrated behind me. I felt the presence before I understood it, the way the silence shifted, the way the floor dipped slightly, as if another step followed mine. This is where the second rule of that night became clear: never face a mirror in the dark unless you are willing to see more than yourself. The mirror was large, its frame cracked and swollen from the damp air, the glass fogged over. Even though the room was dry, stepped closer, drawn by something that did not belong to me, and for a moment I saw only my outline, dim and stretched by the poor light. Then the outline changed subtly, gently, like someone was adjusting it without my permission. My reflection moved half a second slower than I did, as if it were remembering how to follow the rehook. The moment the story type came when I raised my hand to wipe the mirror, and the reflection did not raise its hand. Mine touched the cold glass, and its fingers remained still, hanging by its side. The shape looked like me, but its shoulders were slightly higher, its head tilted just enough to seem wrong, not eerie, but intentional, as if studying the moment I would notice. I froze completely, because fear in its purest form is not the scream, it is the stillness, the moment when logic falls apart quietly. The second key, practical but terrifying, revealed itself when the reflection leaned forward. Even though I did not move, it leaned slow, like someone waking up after a long winter, its face approaching the glass with a patient hunger. The whisper returned, but now it came from inside the mirror, from behind the reflection, soft and close, like someone breathing on the back of my neck. The glass hummed with a faint vibration, and my phone screen flickered. The reflection smiled, not with my mouth, but with an older shape, a deeper fold, a memory I never had. The room darkened around the edges, the cold climbed my legs, and the house shifted again, would contracting in a pattern like a heartbeat. I understood then that the house was not whispering to scare me, it was whispering to teach me, to guide me into the story it had been repeating for years. The mirror was not showing me something new, it was showing me what it wanted from me: a vacancy, a space to be filled. The impact, the framing of the moment is simple and brutal. Once you witness something that remembers you cannot pretend you are alone anymore. The house recognized me, the reflection recognized me, and something behind the glass was waiting for me to answer its silent question. In summary, the whisper grew, the mirror awakened, and the reflection did not belong entirely to me. And now, if you want the truth, the next block will reveal what the reflection tried to become, and how the house changed the moment I stepped back from the glass. I stepped back from the mirror, and the reflection did not follow. And that was the moment I understood that the mirror was not a surface, it was a doorway. The silence in the room thickened like fog, and the whisper that came from behind the glass grew quieter, not fading, but waiting, choosing its moment. The reflection watched me with a stillness that no living body could mimic, its posture tall, its shadow stretched along the floor, even though mine stayed small and close to my feet. The first rule of that night was remember your body, because something in that room wanted to take ownership of it. The air felt heavier. The wooden floor shifted as if the house leaned closer, curious, attentive. My breath became shallow, my skin prickled with a cold that did not come from the weather but from something touching the space around me. The reflection tilted its head, not in confusion but recognition, like it finally saw what it had been waiting for. My shape in the mirror slowly lifted its hand, but mine remained still glued to my side. The truth revealed itself. Piece by piece, the house did not whisper to call me, it whispered to prepare me. It wanted me to understand its rhythm, its patience, its hunger. I watched as the reflection pressed its palm against the glass, and the surface dipped inward, like soft water, the outline of its fingers rippling through the mirror as if it were pushing against something thin, fragile, almost ready to break. The cold deepened, the mirror darkened, and a shadow behind the reflection stretched wider with the steady flow of the whisper. The rehook of that moment arrived when I realized the whisper inside the mirror was not one voice, it was many voices layered on top of each other, low and trembling like people trying to speak through earth and wood. The reflection mouthed something silently, the shapes of the words unfamiliar, but the intention unmistakable. It wanted me to step closer, it needed me to move first. I held my breath and watched the mirror breathe in my place, expanding and contracting with a slow pulse like a sleeping animal. The second practical key hit me with clarity. Never assume a house wants to trap you, sometimes it wants to trade with you. My phone in my hand flickered again, the recording app glitching, the timer running backward instead of forward. My own shadow shifted behind me even though I had not moved, and for a second I saw it lift its arm the same way the reflection had done, a perfect imitation of a gesture I had not made. The house was choosing between us, deciding which version belonged to the glass and which belonged to the floorboards. I stepped back again, and this time the reflection moved, but not in sync. It slid sideways, its motion unnatural, like someone dragging a puppet along invisible strings, its eyes hollow, its shape flickering slightly around the edges. The whisper behind the glass grew louder, still not audible as language, but present like breath fogging up the inside of the mirror. The shadow behind the reflection grew until it swallowed the edges of the frame, turning the glass into a tunnel made of shifting darkness. The deep framing of this moment was simple. The house did not want to haunt me, it wanted to absorb me, to add me to the archive of shapes trapped behind the mirror, to keep my outline breathing and waiting. As the next person arrived, the house collected people, not to kill them, but to store them, to preserve their echo, their last gesture, their unfinished fear. In summary, the reflection awakened, the mirror responded, and the house tightened its grip on the air around me. The mirror was not showing me a ghost, it was showing me a vacancy, a position waiting to be filled. The moment the reflection stepped out of the mirror began quietly, so quietly that I almost convinced myself nothing had changed. The whisper inside the glass faded into a low vibration, like a distant hum, and the surface of the mirror flattened, again becoming calm and still, as if hiding everything it had shown. But the room felt different, the air thicker, the floor colder, and the house waited as if holding a breath that was not mine. The first rule of that night was trust your senses, even when they betray you, because fear sharpens what memory dulls. I felt the temperature drop behind me, as if someone had opened a door to a winter that did not exist. There my shadow stretched across the wooden floor, but a second shadow stretched beside it, slightly taller, slightly misaligned, and I knew without turning that the reflection was no longer inside the glass. I could hear the faint shift of weight on the boards, a softness too precise, too deliberate. I finally turned and saw the figure standing at the corner of the small room, its shape smooth, its edges blurry as if still forming. Its head tilted the same way the reflection had tilted before, but now it breathed, shallow and slow, copying my rhythm, but a fraction delayed. The outline of its body trembled, not with weakness but with adjustment, like skin that had not fully decided what form it should keep. The mirror behind it was dark, not reflective, no longer a surface but an opening that pulsed, gently like something alive waiting to inhale. The rehook struck when the figure moved, and its movement did not match mine, and yet I felt its muscles tighten inside my own arms as if my body were a draft, and it were the final version. It took one step forward, and the floor groaned under its weight, a sound too heavy for something that looked so thin. I stepped back instinctively, and the figure paused, not threatening, not aggressive, merely observing me with a patience that felt ancient. The whisper returned, but now it circled us both, rising from the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards, the entire house, speaking without words. The second key of that night came with horrific clarity. The house was not trying to replace me, it was trying to merge me with the reflection, to make two shapes into one seamless shadow. It wanted a witness and a participant, someone who had heard the whisper and answered, someone who could keep the cycle alive for the next person who would eventually enter its door. The figure raised its hand again, but this time it mimicked my delayed heartbeat, not my movement, its palm opening slowly as if inviting me into a pact. The air thickened, and the space between us closed, like two pages pressed together. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet, the wood tightening surrounding my ankles like a hand made of old beams. My breath caught the cold pressing into my lungs, and the figure stepped closer, its body flickering between forms, the version of me in the mirror, the version of me standing there, and a version I had never seen before. A possible shape, a future outline. The mirror behind it brightened slightly, revealing faint silhouettes trapped within countless vague human shapes pressed against the glass, reaching but never fully emerging. The framing of the moment is simple. Once you stand before something that remembers you before you were even there, you understand the house was never haunted. It was hungry. It fed on recognition, on identity, on unfinished stories, and the whisper was not a warning, it was a call, a summons asking who you were and who you could become if you stepped too close. I closed my eyes for a second, and the floor released my ankles as if reconsidering the choice. The whisper softened, the figure stilled, and the mirror dimmed. The house waited for a decision, and I realized it would accept either outcome. I could step forward and become part of its memory, or step back and leave, but it would never stop whispering. It would never forget me. In summary, the reflection became a body, the mirror became an opening, and the house made its offer quietly, patiently, like something that has all the time in the world. The house waited, and the figure waited, and I understood that silence was its final command, the last test before the decision. Once something ancient stops calling and simply stands before you, the weight of the choice becomes unbearable. The whisper did not return, it simply disappeared, leaving a hollow space where fear and certainty mixed together. I felt the cold withdrawing from my skin, as if the house wanted me calm, focused, prepared. The first truth I learned that night was simple: a place can want something from you without ever speaking, and the harder you listen, the clearer the demand becomes. The figure stood in front of the mirror, the place where it had been born or carved or remembered, and its shape settled into a version of me that felt too accurate, perfect, even like a draft corrected by a hand that knew my flaws better than I did. Its eyes were empty, not lifeless, but waiting for a meaning that only I could give it. The first rule of that final moment was do not move too quickly, because the house reacts like a living thing. The floorboards under my feet expanded slightly, the air thickened, and the walls leaned inward with soft creaks, as if the entire structure wanted to witness the choice. The mirror behind the figure glowed, faintly pulsing in and out like a slow heartbeat, and I realized with horrifying clarity that the mirror was not a reflection or a doorway, but a mouth, and every shape inside it was something it had swallowed before. The rehook came when the figure finally moved, not toward me but sideways, watching me with a tilt of its head, almost curious, almost sympathetic. It extended its hand, not to mimic mine, but to offer Something, an invitation, a promise. The whisper returned, but softer. Now like breath on glass, it said, nothing I could understand, but the intention was unmistakable. Step in step, closer, step into the story, step into the memory, step into the house. The second key of that moment came like a cold flash of truth. The house did not want to take my life, it wanted to take my presence, my outline, my echo. It wanted a part of me not to destroy, but to preserve, to keep the whisper alive for the next person who would eventually cross the threshold. It wanted a guardian, a witness, someone who had seen the mirror breathing and lived long enough to tell someone else to listen. I stepped backward one step, then another. The figure lowered its hand, slowly, almost disappointed, almost relieved, and the mirror dimmed. Again its glow, fading into dull. What the house did not fight me, the floor did not hold me, the walls did not press inward, it simply watched. And that was the worst part. Houses that want you forever will always wait, because time means nothing to places that remember too much. I left the small room, and the whisper followed me down the hallway, not demanding, not angry, simply present, like breath on my neck, like memory. I reached the front door, and the rain outside had stopped. The night still, the world quiet, but the silence felt strange, lighter than before, emptied of something familiar. I stepped outside, and the house did not protest. It let me go, and that was how I knew it had taken something from me anyway. When I reached the road, I turned back. Once the windows of the house were dark, except one, the room with the mirror, a faint glow leaking through the cracks, not warm, not inviting, but patient. The figure stood behind the glass, its outline pressed against the surface, like a shadow wanting to step out again, but respecting the boundary of that night. The framing of this ending is simple. Some places keep a part of you even after you leave, and some choices are not made once, but carried forever. The house still whispers. On rainy nights, I hear it in the pipes and the wind in the walls of wherever I try to sleep. It does not call my name anymore, but it speaks in a rhythm that matches my breath, as if reminding me we are connected and always will be. In summary, I left but not clean the house, let me go but not untouched, and every time it rains, I hear the faint echo of the mirror humming, as if asking whether I will return one day to finish what began.